The auction yard felt like a place where hope came to die. Dust drifted through the hot afternoon air, settling on hats, boots, and the wooden rails that penned in nervous livestock. The sun beat down hard, turning the dirt into a shimmering haze. Men leaned on the fences with arms folded, watching horses file through the ring. Most weren't here to buy. They were here to see how cheap a man's pride could be sold. Jacob Mercer stood at the back, hat low, hands resting on the rail. He wasn't here for entertainment. He needed a workhorse, one good, steady animal to keep his ranch running. His old mare had gone lame, and without a replacement, he'd fall behind before winter even came. The auctioneer's sharp voice cracked across the yard like a whip. Next lot, 3 horses sold as one. No splitting, no exceptions. Born together, raised together. They stay that way. Jacob lifted his head. 3 horses were led into the ring, a gray gelding, lean but sturdy, a chestnut mare, quiet and calm. And then the third, the one that made Jacob's breath catch, a Black Stallion. Tall, muscled, coat shining even under dust. Eyes sharp as broken glass. Head held too high for a horse that had seen a rope before. He didn't look broken. He looked insulted to be tied. The seller stepped forward. A wiry man with shift eyes and a smile that didn't fit. His hat looked older than he was, and his vest carried stains that told stories Jacob didn't want to know. "These 3 were born the same night," the man shouted. "Same storm, same mare, miracle foals, strongest trio you'll ever see. But I'm telling you, no splitting." The crowd murmured. Jacob frowned. Horses didn't come in 3s. Twins were rare. Triplets were impossible. The seller was lying. But Jacob couldn't ignore the stallion. Its ears pinned back every time the seller stepped close. Its gaze moved across the crowd and, for a brief second, landed on Jacob. It wasn't a normal look, not dull or fearful, focused, intent. Like the horse understood far too much, the auctioneer called for the first bid. No hands went up. The seller forced a laugh. "3 for the price of 1. Strong workers. Perfect deal, gentlemen." Quote. Still, no one moved. Then the stallion's gaze shifted again, locking onto Jacob. A chill ran down his back. The auctioneer lowered the price. "Going once. I'll take 'em." Jacob didn't even realize the words came from him until the crowd turned to stare. A few men snickered. The seller grinned wide. Too wide. "Smart man," he said, stepping in quickly as if afraid Jacob would change his mind. "You got yourself a real fine deal." Jacob wasn't sure about that. An hour later, he was leading the 3 horses behind his wagon, ropes tied snug. The gray and chestnut followed calmly. The Black Stallion moved with tension in every line of his body, head turning sharply as if memorizing everything around them. Faces, animals, exits. Jacob climbed onto the wagon seat and urged the horses on. As the auction yard faded behind them, he glanced back. The seller still stood there watching him go, arms crossed, expression cold. As if he hadn't made a sale at all, as if he'd unloaded a burden. The uneasy feeling followed Jacob all the way down the dusty road. The miles rolled by slow. The sun dipped low, turning the sky into a wash of orange and red. The only sounds were the grind of wagon wheels and hooves on hard dirt. Jacob forced himself not to look back, but he felt it. The Black Stallion wasn't watching the road anymore. It was watching him. By the time the ranch came into view, night had settled over the valley. The barn stood dark and wide, doors open like a waiting mouth. Jacob parked the wagon, climbed down, and led the horses to the stalls. Gray on the left, Chestnut in the middle, Black on the right. The first 2 dipped their heads into the trough. The stallion didn't move, didn't drink, didn't blink. It just watched Jacob. "What's your story?" Jacob muttered. No answer, not even a snort. Jacob walked out and closed the barn door behind him. He stood outside for a moment, listening to the night settle, crickets chirping, wind brushing across the grass. a distant coyote calling. Then he heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Jacob's hand froze on the door handle. That wasn't a whinny, not a snort, not hooves shifting restlessly. It was deliberate, purposeful. He pushed the barn door open. The Black Stallion stood at the front of its stall, one hoof raised. It struck the ground again, 3 sharp taps, then lowered its hoof and turned its head toward the far corner of the barn, toward the old storage room he hadn't opened in nearly a year. Jacob swallowed hard. "What are you trying to tell me?" The stallion didn't move. It just kept staring at that door, as if something or someone waited on the other side. Jacob stepped back out of the barn and closed the door slowly. He did not sleep that night. The sun rose pale and quiet over the valley, but the uneasy feeling hadn't left. Jacob grabbed his coat, crossed the yard, and pushed the barn doors open again. The Black Stallion stood alert, eyes fixed on him. Jacob walked past the stalls and stopped at the old storage room door. The lock was rusted, the wood warped. He hadn't touched it in months. But now, with the stallion watching, he pulled the key from his pocket. His hand shook. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The air inside was stale with dust and old leather. The room was dim, lit only by a thin slice of light from a high window. Jacob stepped inside, eyes scanning shelves cluttered with old equipment. Then he saw it. A saddle, buried beneath canvas, old, heavy, marked with a brand, 3 interlocking circles. Jacob's breath stopped. He knew that symbol. It belonged to outlaws long dead. And somehow, those 3 horses were tied to them. Jacob backed out of the storage room, breath tight in his chest. The saddle felt like a ghost from another life, a life he had buried deep. But the Black Stallion watched him with sharp, knowing eyes, as if waiting for him to say what they both already understood. "You were there," Jacob whispered, "with the Caldwells." The horse did not move, but something in its posture shifted. Recognition, memory, something old and terrible rising quietly between them. Jacob stepped back, heart pounding. The Caldwells had been one of the worst outlaw gangs to ever ride the frontier. He'd seen what they left behind. He'd seen the canyon where they made their last stand. He'd seen the bodies. He'd thought the horses had been sold off clean, scattered across the territory. But now 3 of them stood in his barn, and someone wanted them back. Jacob walked out into the sunlight, his thoughts racing like wildfire. He should return them, pretend he'd made a mistake, cut himself free of the trouble before it arrived. But trouble didn't wait. That night, as Jacob finished a lonely supper in his cabin, hoofbeats came from the road. Slow, steady, deliberate. He set his cup down and moved to the window. 3 riders. Not rushing, not sneaking. Men who knew they were not afraid of the dark. Jacob reached for the rifle mounted over the door. The riders stopped just outside the fence. One dismounted and walked forward with empty hands, wearing a smile as sour as vinegar. "Evenin'," the man called out. "Name's Doyle. We're looking for something that belongs to us." Jacob didn't answer. Doyle kept walking, boots crunching on dirt. 3 horses sold at auction a few days ago. A gray, a chestnut, and a Black Stallion. "You seen 'em?" Quote. Jacob lifted the rifle, just enough for the moonlight to catch the barrel. "Depends," he said. "Who's asking?" Doyle's smile thinned. "Men you don't want to lie to." Behind him, the other 2 riders rested hands on their guns. Jacob didn't flinch. "If you got a claim, take it up with the auction yard." Doyle let out a soft chuckle. "Oh, we will, but we're taking our horses first." Jacob leveled the rifle. "Not from my land." A long silence stretched between them. Then Doyle nodded once. "We'll be back." The 3 men mounted and rode off, swallowed by the night. Jacob stood frozen on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. In the barn, the horses shuffled nervously. The Black Stallion let out a low snort, deep and sharp, like a warning. Jacob didn't sleep. He sat in the dark cabin with the rifle across his lap, lantern burning low. Every sound outside made him stiffen. The wind. The creak of a shutter. coyotes calling in the distance. But no riders returned. When the sun rose, he went to the barn. The gray and Chestnut paced their stalls restlessly. The Black Stallion stood tall and alert, ears pricked, as if waiting for something Jacob couldn't see. "They'll be back," Jacob murmured. He reinforced the barn doors, tightened the gate, stacked ammunition near the cabin door. But deep down he knew boards and nails wouldn't stop what was coming. By noon, he made a decision he didn't want to make. He saddled his old mare and rode into town. The settlement was small, just a general store, a saloon, and a handful of tired ranch hands leaning against hitching posts. Jacob tied his horse outside the store and stepped in. Farley, the old clerk, looked up. "Jacob, trouble?" "Information," Jacob said. "The Caldwells." Farley stiffened. "They're dead." "Not all of them," Jacob said quietly. "Some are looking for horses." Farley's face paled. "You've got 'em." Jacob nodded once. Farley cursed under his breath. "Give them up, Jacob. You can rebuild a ranch. You can't rebuild your life once it's gone." "I'm not giving them up." Farley stared at him a long moment, then disappeared into the back room. He returned with a shotgun and a box of shells. "Then take this, and hope you never need it." Jacob didn't argue. He rode home as the sun lowered, shadows stretching across the valley. The barn felt colder than usual when he walked inside. The three horses lifted their heads together, watching him. "Looks like we're not done," he told them quietly. Night fell heavy and slow. Jacob sat inside the cabin, rifle across his knees, shotgun leaning against the wall. Hours passed. Then came the sound. Hoofbeats. But this time, there were more. Many more. Jacob rose and went to the window. A line of riders, 6, maybe 7, approached the ranch. They fanned out in a slow arc, surrounding the property. This wasn't a warning. This was a siege. Jacob stepped onto the porch as the riders halted. Doyle dismounted again, but the friendly mask was gone. "Last chance," Doyle said. "Give us the horses and no one dies." "No," Jacob said, voice steady. Doyle sighed. "Have it your way." He raised a hand. 2 riders dismounted and marched toward the barn. Inside, the horses reacted. The Chestnut shrieked first, sharp and furious. The gray pawed the ground. The Black Stallion's cry tore through the night like a blade. Then, the barn doors exploded outward. The Black Stallion burst through them in a spray of splintered wood, Gray and Chestnut at his sides. They charged like a storm. The first outlaw was knocked off his feet before he even drew his gun. The second turned and ran, screaming. Riders tried to fire, but their horses panicked, bucking and bolting. The 3 horses moved as one, trained, coordinated, fearless. Jacob froze, stunned by the speed and power. He had seen battles. He had ridden with lawmen, but he had never seen animals fight like this, like they remembered every outlaw who ever touched them. Doyle swore and scrambled back to his horse. "Fall back! Fall back!" The riders fled into the darkness, some dragged by terrified mounts, others stumbling on foot. Within seconds, the yard was silent again. Jacob lowered his rifle slowly, still shaking. The Black Stallion stood in the yard, chest heaving, eyes burning like coals. It turned its head toward Jacob, and Jacob finally understood. He wasn't protecting them, they were protecting him. The night after the attack felt too still, too quiet, as if the whole valley waited to see what Jacob Mercer would do next. The splintered barn doors lay scattered across the yard, broken oak shining pale under the moonlight. The 3 horses stood near the well, calm now but alert, watching the road, the trees, the horizon. Jacob barely slept. At dawn, he stepped outside with tired eyes and a heart full of worry. Doyle would come back. Men like him didn't accept defeat. They came with bigger guns, more bodies, and the kind of hate that didn't stop until someone was buried. But Jacob wasn't alone anymore. Farley arrived by mid-morning, with a wagon full of supplies and 3 more ranchers behind him. They'd heard the gunshots. They'd heard the yelling. They'd heard the impossible story of 3 horses fighting off armed outlaws. Jacob tried to send them back. Farley crossed his arms. "Jacob, you took a stand. And in this territory, that means something. We stand with you." Quote. Jacob exhaled slowly. A man could lose a ranch, a horse, even a life, but losing hope was worse, and these men brought hope with them. They spent the day reinforcing the ranch. Fences tightened, gates checked, ammunition stacked, coffee brewed strong enough to open a dead man's eyes. All the while, the 3 horses stayed close, moving together like shadows in sunlight. The gray grazed by the water trough. The chestnut watched the tree line. The Black Stallion never left the yard. It stood like a sentry, silent, steady, aware. As the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the world in gold and blood red, Jacob stepped toward the stallion. "You knew they'd come," Jacob said, voice low, "didn't you?" The horse didn't nod. Horses don't do that, but its ears leaned forward, and its dark eyes met Jacob's in a way that made him feel the truth deep inside his bones. They were waiting again. That night, Jacob sat outside the cabin with Farley and the others. Lantern light flickered against the wood, giving the small circle of men a solemn glow. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The air already spoke of what was coming. And then, just after dawn, the riders appeared. Not 3, not 7, a dozen or more. They came slow, wide, and certain. Men, dressed in dust-coated coats, rifles slung across saddles, faces tight with anger. Doyle rode in front, jaw clenched, eyes burning with humiliation and revenge. Jacob stepped forward with the rifle in hand. Farley took his place beside him. The others spread out across the yard. But Jacob's eyes drifted toward the barn. The 3 horses appeared in the doorway, tall, calm, unafraid. The Black Stallion stepped forward until it stood in open view. The outlaws hesitated. Something about the stallion made even hardened men ease off their reins. Doyle swung his leg over and dismounted. "Enough of this! You're outnumbered, Mercer. You can't win." Jacob raised his voice. "They're not yours." Doyle spat at the dirt. "They belong to the Caldwells," which makes them ours now. "No," Jacob said. "They belong to the people the Caldwells stole from. They belong to the land. They belong to themselves." Quote. Doyle's hand twitched. "Last chance. Move aside." Jacob didn't move, neither did the men behind him. And then, like thunder rumbling through quiet air, the Black Stallion let out a deep, commanding call. A sound that didn't feel like a horse. A sound that felt like a leader. Every horse in Doyle's gang reacted at once. Ears back, hooves scraping, muscles shivering like they'd been hit by lightning. One by one, they turned from their riders and stepped away. Some backed up, some circled. One reared, knocking its rider into the dirt. "Hold them!" Doyle yelled. "Hold them, damn it!" But the horses did not obey. The Black Stallion stepped forward again, slow and deliberate. The gray and chestnut flanked him like loyal soldiers. Behind them, Doyle's horses shifted, drawn toward the trio like metal to a magnet. Jacob's breath caught. They weren't just bonded to each other. They commanded other horses. Doyle panicked. He reached for his gun. Jacob raised his rifle. "Don't." But it wasn't Jacob who stopped him. The Black Stallion surged forward with a power that seemed to shake the ground. His hooves struck dirt with thunder. The outlaws, horses, bolted in every direction, scattering men, kicking up dust like a tornado of hooves and fear. Doyle stumbled back, tripped, and fell. With terror in his eyes, he scrambled away on hands and knees. Farley shouted, "Leave him! Let him run!" Doyle didn't look back. His men followed him, limping, crawling, stumbling until they vanished into the hills. Silence settled, deep, heavy, and unreal. Jacob lowered his rifle. The 3 horses stood in the center of the yard, calm as morning dew. The Black Stallion lifted its head and looked at Jacob, really looked, before turning away, as if to say the fight was done. For now. Days passed. Then, weeks. No one came back. Doyle's gang had fled the territory entirely, leaving behind the horses that had refused to carry them into violence. Those horses joined Jacob's herd. They followed the Black Stallion, the Gray, and the Chestnut like a new family. The valley grew peaceful again, touched by a strange, quiet magic no one talked about but everyone felt. One evening, Jacob leaned against the fence, watching the herd graze under a soft orange sky. The Black Stallion lifted its head and looked at him across the field. Jacob raised his coffee cup in a small salute. The stallion turned back to the grass. Jacob's chest warmed. People would ask him about his ranch years later. They'd ask how he'd rebuilt, how he'd protected it, how he'd survived. Jacob always answered with a small smile. Found the right horses, made the right choices, got a little lucky. But sometimes at night, when the stars were bright and the wind whispered along the valley floor, Jacob would walk out to the pasture. The Black Stallion would be waiting there, silent and steady. Jacob would lay a hand on its neck and whisper, "Thank you." The horse never spoke. It didn't have to. Some bonds weren't born of blood or saddles or ownership. Some were born of fire, trust, and a single decision to stand together when every voice said to run. Jacob Mercer found that bond in 3 horses born from a lie, and it saved his life.